Factfulness: 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World, and Why Things Are Better Than You Think, by Anna Rosling. Introduction. I want to tell you a story about a man who swallowed a sword in front of the world's most powerful leaders. Not as a circus trick, but as a lesson. The man was a brilliant professor of global health named Anna Rosling. And he would end his lectures, not with a simple thank you, but by ripping off his shirt to reveal a sparkly vest, calling for a drum roll, and slowly sliding a Swedish army bayonet down his throat. The audience would go wild. But why would a respected scientist do such a thing? He did it to prove a point. He did it to show that the seemingly impossible can be possible. He had just spent an hour showing these leaders, CEOs, presidents, Nobel laureates, that their entire understanding of the world was fundamentally wrong. They thought the world was divided into rich and poor, that poverty was getting worse, and that humanity was doomed. He showed them the data. He proved that the world was, in fact, getting better. That billions had escaped poverty, that children were surviving, that the world was more educated and healthier than at any point in human history. To them, these facts seemed as impossible as swallowing a sword. So, he swallowed the sword. And as he stood there, with a bayonet down his throat, he wanted them to feel a sense of wonder, to ask themselves, if that's possible, what else have I been wrong about? This is the story of the book Factfulness. It's not just a book of statistics, it's a guide to thinking clearly about the world. And it was Anna Rosling's final gift to us, a mission he dedicated the last years of his life to completing. He discovered that on basic questions about global trends, from poverty to health, the vast majority of people get the answers wrong. Not just a little wrong. Systematically wrong. In fact, he proved that a chimpanzee, picking answers at random, would score better on his tests than the world's most educated people. Think about that. Journalists, politicians, business leaders, worse than a chimp. So why are we so wrong, and what can we do about it? That is the journey we are about to take. By the end of our time together, you'll have a new set of tools to see the world not as it feels, but as it truly is. You'll learn to replace your dramatic, anxious worldview with one based on facts. And in doing so, you might just find that the world is a much more hopeful place than you ever imagined. Book summary. Let's begin with a simple question. Do you think the world, overall, is getting better or getting worse? If you're like most people, your gut instinct probably leans toward worse. We are constantly bombarded with news of war, disaster, poverty, and corruption. It feels like things are spiraling out of control. Anna Rosling calls this the overdramatic worldview. It's stressful, it's misleading, and it's almost entirely wrong. For decades, Rosling traveled the world with a simple quiz. 13 fact-based questions about the state of the world. He asked these questions to thousands of people, from students to medical professionals, from business executives at Google and Coca-Cola to political leaders at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The results were shocking. On average, people got only 2 out of 12 questions right. A stunning 15% scored 0. Remember, with 3 choices per question, a chimpanzee would get 4 right just by guessing. This isn't about being unintelligent. These were brilliant, well-meaning people. The problem wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was that they had actively wrong knowledge. Their heads were full of ideas that were decades out of date. Rosling realized that this wasn't the media's fault, or the fault of fake news. The problem was deeper. It was in us. Our brains are hardwired with instincts that helped our ancestors survive on the savannah, but in today's complex world, these instincts mislead us. They make us crave drama, jump to conclusions, and see the world in black and white. He identified 10 of these dramatic instincts, and the most powerful, the one that distorts our worldview more than any other, is what he called the gap instinct. This is the irresistible temptation to divide everything into two opposing groups, us and them, rich and poor, the West and the rest. We imagine a huge gap between these two groups. This is the picture most of us have in our heads, a world divided. On one side, there's the developed world, small families, long lives, high income. On the other, the developing world, huge families, short lives, extreme poverty. The problem? This picture of the world is from 1965. Back then, it was true. The world really was divided into two distinct camps. But would you use a map from 1965 to navigate your city today? Of course not. The world has completely changed. Today, the vast majority of humanity lives in the middle. The gap is gone. The two boxes of developed and developing are meaningless. In fact, 85% of the world's population now lives in what used to be called the developing world. But their lives have been transformed. Their girls go to school, their children get vaccinated, and most families have only 2 children. This US versus them thinking is so ingrained that it blinds us to reality. Rosling knew he had to replace this broken model with something better, something more accurate. So he created a simple framework that I believe is the most important lesson from this book. Instead of 2 boxes, he divided the world into 4 income levels. Think of it like the levels of a video game. Everyone in the world lives on one of these 4 levels, based on their daily income. Level 1 is extreme poverty. 1 billion people live here today. You live on less than $2 a day. You walk for hours, barefoot, to fetch water from a dirty hole. You cook over an open fire, and your family eats the same porridge every single day. Your children often get sick, and you can't afford medicine. One of them might die from a simple illness. This is a life of constant struggle for survival. 200 years ago, 85% of the world lived on level 1. Level 2 is where the largest portion of humanity lives today, 3 billion people. Your income has quadrupled to about $4 a day. You can buy food you didn't grow yourself, maybe some chickens for eggs. You save up and buy sandals for your kids, and a bicycle, so fetching water doesn't take all day. You get a gas stove, which means your children can go to school instead of gathering firewood. You can even get electricity, though it's unstable. Life is much better, but it's still uncertain. One serious illness could send you right back to level 1. Level 3 is home to 2 billion people. You're now earning around $16 a day. You work long hours, but you have savings. You install a cold water tap in your home? No more fetching water. You have stable electricity, so you buy a fridge. You can save up for a motorcycle, which lets you travel to a better paying job. Your children can finish high school. For the first time, you might even take a vacation, just a trip to the beach for an afternoon. Level 4 is where you, reading this, most likely live. 1 billion people are on this level. You earn more than $64 a day. You have more than 12 years of education. You have hot and cold water, a car, and you can fly abroad for holidays. Life on this level is comfortable. This 4-level framework shatters the myth of a divided world. It shows us that the world is a continuous spectrum of living standards. And most importantly, it reveals that the majority of people are not living in desperate poverty. They're on levels 2 and 3, building better lives, step by step. This isn't just a hopeful idea, it's a fact. And it's the key to unlocking a correct view of the world. Once you see the world through these 4 levels, the other instincts that fool you start to lose their power. Take the negativity instinct, our tendency to notice the bad more than the good. Gradual improvement isn't news. A plane that lands safely isn't a headline. But a plane that crashes is. Over time, this selective reporting creates the overwhelming feeling that things are getting worse. But what do the facts say? Let's look at extreme poverty, life on level 1. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty has almost halved. This is the most important change in the world during our lifetime. In just 2 decades, over 1 billion people have lifted themselves out of the worst suffering known to man. But only 7% of people know this. Rosling's mantra to fight the negativity instinct is simple, yet profound. Things can be both bad and better. Imagine a premature baby in an incubator. Her situation is critical. It's bad. But every day, her vital signs are improving. She is getting better. Is it helpful to say her situation is either bad or improving? No. It's both. The world is that premature baby. There are still immense problems. 1 billion people on level 1 is 1 billion too many. But the world is also getting better, dramatically so. Holding both ideas in your head at once is the key to a fact-based worldview. It protects you from both hopelessness and naive optimism. This brings us to another powerful instinct, the fear instinct. Our brains have a built-in attention filter. We can't process everything, so our brains prioritize what seems dangerous: stories of violence, disaster, disease, and terror. These things trigger deep, evolutionary fears of physical harm, captivity, and contamination. The media knows this. And so, our picture of the world becomes a highlight reel of the worst things happening on any given day. The paradox is that the world has never been safer, but the image of a dangerous world has never been broadcast more effectively. Consider natural disasters. Over the last 100 years, how has the number of deaths per year from natural disasters changed? Has it more than doubled, stayed the same, or decreased to less than half? The vast majority of people believe it has doubled. The correct answer is C. It has decreased to less than half. In fact, it's just 25% of what it was a century ago. Why? Because the majority of humanity no longer lives on level 1. With higher income comes better buildings, better infrastructure, and better warning systems. We are better at protecting ourselves. The same is true for plane crashes. In 2016, 40 million commercial flights landed safely. Only 10 ended in a fatal accident. That's 0.000025%. Yet which ones do we hear about? Fear makes us get our priorities wrong. In the 10 days after the tragic 2015 Nepal earthquake, which killed 9,000 people, the world's attention was fixed on the rescue efforts. During those same 10 days, another 9,000 children around the world died from diarrhea caused by contaminated water. There were no camera crews, no helicopters. The solution to their problem isn't dramatic. It's pipes, pumps, and soap. The lesson here is to distinguish between what is frightening and what is dangerous. The risk of something is not how scared it makes you feel. The risk is danger multiplied by exposure. When we let fear guide us, we focus on the rare shark attack instead of the common, preventable diseases that kill millions. Now let's look at how we misunderstand trends. This is the straight line instinct. Our brain loves to assume that a line on a graph will continue in the same direction. When we see the world population chart, which has shot up dramatically in the last century, our instinct tells us it will just keep going up and up, forever. This is terrifying. It fuels fears of overpopulation and resource depletion. But this instinct is wrong. Rosling asks a simple question. Today, there are 2 billion children in the world aged 0 to 15. How many children will there be in the year 2100, according to UN experts? A. 4 billion. B. 3 billion. C. 2 billion. Almost everyone picks A or B. They assume the number of children will keep growing. The correct answer is C. The number of children in the world is expected to stay the same. We have reached what Rosling calls peak child. The number of children in the world has stopped increasing. So why will the total population continue to grow by another 3 billion people? It's not because we're having more babies. It's because the 2 billion children alive today, and the 2 billion young adults, will grow up and fill up the older age groups. It's a fill-up effect that takes a few generations, and then it's done. The population will level off somewhere between 10 and 12 billion people. What caused this incredible change? The number of babies per woman worldwide has dropped from an average of 5 in 1965 to just 2.5 today. This happened as people escaped poverty, child survival improved, and women got educated. Parents no longer needed to have many children for farm labor or as insurance against some of them dying. This is the new balance. For the first time in human history, parents can have 2 children, and both of them will likely survive. Understanding this helps us see why saving the lives of poor children doesn't cause overpopulation. It's the exact opposite. When child survival rates improve, parents choose to have smaller families. The single most proven way to curb population growth is to eradicate extreme poverty. Another instinct that trips us up is the generalization instinct. We naturally categorize and stereotype. It's a mental shortcut, but it often leads to massive misunderstandings. When we think of Africa, we often picture a single story of poverty and conflict. But Africa is a continent of 54 countries. Life in Tunisia is as different from life in Somalia as life in Sweden is from life in Afghanistan. Generalizing about Africa is as meaningless as generalizing about Asia. The same goes for religion. Many people assume that certain religions lead to larger families. But when you look at the data, the single biggest factor determining family size isn't religion, it's income. Across all major religions, people on level 1 have large families, and people on levels 2, 3, and 4 have small families. Muslim women in Iran today have fewer children than Christian women in the United States. Our stereotypes fall apart when confronted with facts. To fight this, Rosling encourages us to question our categories. Look for differences within groups and similarities across groups. And assume that other people are not idiots. If something looks strange, like a half-built house in Tunisia, don't assume people are lazy. Be curious and ask, in what way is this a smart solution? The answer, it's a way of saving. In places without reliable banks, you buy bricks one by one and add them to your house. It's a physical savings account, safe from inflation and theft. This leads us to the destiny instinct, the idea that the characteristics of people, countries, or cultures are fixed and unchangeable. Africa will always be poor. Asian values will never change. This is simply not true. Societies are in constant transformation. My own grandfather in Sweden, just a couple of generations ago, lived with patriarchal values that many would today label Asian or African. He believed women belonged in the home and would never talk about contraception. Today, Sweden is seen as a bastion of gender equality and sexual openness. Cultures are not rocks. They move. And often, they move much faster than we think. Slow change is not no change. A 1% improvement each year seems tiny, but it leads to a doubling in 70 years. This is how progress happens, gradually, then suddenly. Then there's the instinct for simple answers. The single perspective instinct is our love for simple causes and simple solutions. It's the hammer and nail problem. If your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Ideologues and experts often fall into this trap. If you believe the free market is the only answer, you'll see government as the cause of all problems. If you believe inequality is the only problem, you'll see redistribution as the only solution. The world is too complex for a single perspective. Rosling uses the example of Cuba and the United States. Cuba, with its single-minded focus on state-run services, has achieved health outcomes as good as the U.S. on a fraction of the income. A Cuban minister proudly told him, "We are the healthiest of the poor," but a quiet statistician whispered the truth in his ear, "No. We are the poorest of the healthy." Meanwhile, the U.S., with its deep belief in market-driven solutions, spends more on healthcare per person than any other country in the world, yet has a lower life expectancy than 39 other countries. It is the sickest of the rich. Neither system is a perfect model. The real world requires a toolbox, not just a hammer. You need to combine ideas, compromise, and solve problems on a case-by-case basis. This brings us to one of our most powerful instincts, the blame instinct. When something bad happens, we look for a villain. A greedy CEO, a lying journalist, a corrupt politician. It's satisfying to point a finger. But it stops us from thinking. When Rosling's students wanted to punch the face of the pharma CEO for not researching diseases of the poor, he walked them through the logic. The CEO answers to the board. The board answers to the shareholders. Who are the shareholders? Often, it's retirement funds. Who owns the retirement funds? Ordinary people, like your grandmother. Blaming a single villain distracts us from the real cause, the system. The system is designed to maximize profit, and there's no profit in curing people who have no money. The problem isn't an evil person, it's a flawed system. If you want to change the world, you have to understand the system. Finally, there's the urgency instinct. Now or never. Salespeople and activists use this to shut down our analytical thinking and force a quick decision. Rosling tells a heartbreaking story from his time as a doctor in Mozambique. A mysterious paralytic disease was spreading in a rural area. Fearing a contagious epidemic, he and the local mayor felt an urgent need to do something. They set up a roadblock to stop buses from leaving the area. The next day, the women who needed to get to the market to sell their goods, finding the road blocked, took to small fishing boats. The boats capsized. Dozens of mothers and children drowned. His urgent, panicked decision, made with the best of intentions, had led to a terrible tragedy. The lesson: when a decision feels urgent, take a breath. It's rarely now or never. It's rarely either/or. An urgent problem requires data and cool-headed analysis, not drastic, uninformed action. This is the essence of factfulness. It is the practice of controlling these 10 dramatic instincts. It's the humility to recognize that you don't know everything, and the curiosity to find out. Anna Rosling's life was saved by this very principle. He was in a remote village in Congo, surrounded by an angry mob with machetes. They believed he was a foreign doctor who had come to steal their blood. Fear, blame, and urgency had taken over. Just as things were about to turn violent, a barefoot, illiterate woman stepped forward. She quieted the crowd. She reminded them of the measles vaccine. She remembered how their children used to die from measles, and then doctors came with research, and now they don't. She made the connection. "How do you think they discovered the measles vaccine?" she asked. "They do what this doctor calls research. I have a grandchild crippled by this disease. If we let him study us, maybe he can stop it." She rolled up her sleeve and said, "Here, doctor. Take my blood." In that moment of extreme tension, this woman demonstrated perfect factfulness. She controlled her fear, she looked for a rational cause, and she remembered that things can, and do, get better. She saved his life. If she could do it then, we can do it now. We can learn to see the world not as it appears through the dramatic filter of our instincts, but as it really is, a world that is still full of challenges, but also, and overwhelmingly, a world that is getting better. Commentary. When you finish Factfulness, it feels like you've been given a new pair of glasses. The blurry, scary, chaotic world suddenly snaps into focus. And for the first time, you see it clearly. What makes this book so powerful is not just the data, but the deep humanity behind it. Anna Rosling wasn't just a statistician, he was a doctor who had spent his life on the front lines of global health, in the poorest corners of the world. He had seen the suffering firsthand. He counted dead children. He knew the world was, in many ways, a hard place. And yet, this is what makes his message so profoundly hopeful. He wasn't an optimist looking at the world from an ivory tower. He was a possibilist who had witnessed incredible progress in the face of impossible odds. He saw that change was not only possible, but that it was happening all around us, silently, gradually, and almost entirely unnoticed. The book is his final plea to us. He was diagnosed with incurable cancer as he began writing it, and he poured the wisdom of his entire life into these pages. He knew this was his last chance to arm us against the ignorance that he saw as so devastating. Devastating because it breeds fear and hopelessness. When we wrongly believe that nothing is improving, we lose confidence in the measures that are actually working. We give up. Factfulness is the antidote to that despair. It's a source of mental peace. It frees you from the stress of having to have an opinion on everything and the anxiety of a world that feels like it's constantly on the brink of collapse. So, what can you do with this today? Here are a few simple ways to start practicing factfulness in your own life. First, the next time you see a dramatic headline or a scary news report, pause and ask yourself, which of my dramatic instincts is this story triggering? Is it fear? Blame? Urgency? Just recognizing the instinct is the first step to controlling it. Second, whenever you encounter a single, big, lonely number, always ask for another number to compare it with. 4.2 million babies died last year is a tragedy. But knowing that number was 14.4 million in 1950 reveals a story of incredible progress. Context is everything. And third, carry the 4 income levels in your mind. Remember that the world isn't divided into rich and poor. Most people are in the middle, and their lives are getting better. This simple framework will help you make sense of almost any global story you encounter. That was a summary of Factfulness by Anna Rosling. We've explored the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent feast. You can see what's on the table, but you can't taste the food. The real magic of this book is in the stories, the charts, and the profound sense of clarity that comes from reading it yourself. It's in those quiet moments when one of Hans's anecdotes connects with your own experience and changes the way you see things forever. This summary is a map, but the book is the journey. If anything we've discussed today has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to take that journey. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It tells us we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.